The greatness of the ideals of the past is a promise of greater ideals for the future. Sri Aurobindo said this in the context of the ideals that were held by Indian cultural tradition. Let's see what this means in the context of gender relations the topic that we've been discussing. So, most of the scholars today of Indian culture and Indian history agree that at one point of time in India, women enjoyed a very high status in the society. They were equal to men in all respects, in the sense of the educational opportunities that were given to them. Their status in the society was also very high. We have evidence of this from various sources, from our scriptures, from our texts on policy, our Niti Shastras, our Arth Shastras, our Dharma Shastras, and also there is a lot of sculptural epigraphic evidence as well that documents what was the status of women in the society. Starting from the Rig Veda itself, there is anywhere from 21 to 27 women rishikas who have composed some very significant hymns or mantras in the Rig Veda itself. One of the very important sukta, in the Upanishadic tradition also, two names that really jump out are Gargi and Maitri. There is also a lot of evidence of, particularly in the Mahabharata, about the preference for a female child. In one of the Upanishads, there is also a mention of specific rituals that the couple would go through if they desired a female child. Of course, there is a specific ritual mentioned also for the preference for a male child. That's been there in all societies as well. So, a culture that valued female child so much. In the Mahabharata, for example, in the Anushasan Parv, we have a reference where that in a daughter, the goddess of prosperity lives always. So the idea of when a daughter is born, people say that the prosperity or the goddess of wealth is born in the family. That has continued to this day. And this is from the Anushasan Parv. In the southern recension, we find this. A daughter is like the great goddess of good fortune for everything good in this world. So a culture or a society that was based on this ideal of what status is given to a female child, to girls being born, to daughters born in the family, naturally there will be a lot of emphasis given on the education, the training of these children, these girls. So again, we find a lot of evidence in various texts, in various scriptures about girls being given full opportunities to blossom, to educate themselves. Even there is evidence in one of the Dharma Shastras of the Upanayan Sanskar, the formal ritual that was done before a child was ready for higher education. And there is also a tradition of girls being given a choice whether to choose the path of marriage after formal 12 years of education or to go into higher education. So the term that was used was Brahmavadinis, those who would go for higher learning, which at the time was primarily Vedic learning or one of the Vedangas, the limbs of the Vedas. Those who would pursue the Brahman, the knowledge of the higher self, the Vedic Vedantic study, or those who would choose the path of marriage, family life. Not just in the Vedic Vedantic learning, the higher learning of the self, the higher pursuit of Brahman, there is also evidence of girls being trained in military, in warfare. Then in the Ramayana again we have the story of Kaikeyi, who accompanied her husband in military expeditions. Girls and women also were highly trained in many of the fine arts, the performing arts. In fact, in the Kam Shastra we have mention of these 64 kalas, and Rishi Vatsyayan of the Kam Shastra speaks about how every woman should know as many as possible of these 64 kalas, and he makes a very specific note that these kalas, these arts can come in handy whenever a woman or a girl needs to sustain herself. either she's separated from her husband or from her father and she needs to earn money, this is what her wealth is going to be. So the idea of women's preparation, girls' preparation, educational preparation so that they can take care of themselves as they grow was also there in our tradition. One has to take a very deep look at the history of Indian society and what happened, how this status that women and girls had in the ancient past, when and for what reasons that started to decline. Around 300 BCE or something like that, as the invasions first from the Greeks, Parthians, Scythians began, the society went into a self-preservation mode. And that's when, this idea that girls and women or all the vulnerable sections of the population who needed to be protected, this idea took over. The Indian consciousness will begin to widen itself, expand itself, heighten itself. The women's status will also begin to improve. So what does it mean for the soul of a nation to become wider, to become to heighten itself, to become expansive in its outlook? That's what we will take a look at in our next video. Thank you.